you see that the world filled with greed in the dark of Mars? Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Welcome to your cell at the Proving Grounds. The world has lost its mind and it's in flames. But, my dear friend, this is where your story begins. Today we're talking about Soul Sacrifice Delta. It is important to note that there are two versions of this game. The original Soul Sacrifice and Delta. So, this is about Delta. I don't have any real experience with the original release. Now, Delta is an enhanced version with additional content and 2 new endings on top of the original 2 endings and the original content with some balance changes. To my understanding, some charges and adjustments were made different between the original and Delta, but again, I don't have a lot of experience with the original version, so I can't comment too much on that. So let's get into it. Let's start with a little introductory for the story. You begin as a prisoner, and the world is decaying and falling apart into chaos and the apocalypse. As a sorcerer, an immortal sorcerer has brought the world to its knees. But to sustain his life, he must have sacrifices. Hence, you and your fellow prisoners, your sacrifices for his immortality. When his newest victim gets killed, a book falls out of his cell into yours, and this book, named Limbrum, talks to you and offers you an opportunity to break free and escape your fate. But can you? Inside the pages of Limbrum are the memories of the author of the book, and through that, you can learn magic. Basically, the idea is to go through the Book of Limbrum, become powerful, and then decide when you want to fight the sorcerer who imprisons you. You can pretty much do this at any point in the game. Of course, if you want to unravel the mystery of who or what the fuck is even going on, you must read Limbrum all the way through to find out the true meaning of what's going on in the world. As I said, Delta has more story and 2 additional endings, so there was more to be found out through Limbrum than what meets the eye. Now, I do want to point out, if you're going into this from Soul Sacrifice going into the Delta version, you'll be happy to hear, as long as you have the same region versions, whether they be physically or digitally, you can import your original data into Delta and literally pick up where you are. So if you finish the original game, you can literally just load it into Delta and start the Delta content right there. Bingo. Awesome, right? That's great. It's fantastic for those who want to upgrade. Just make sure your stuff is the same region, not cross-regioned, because usually save data doesn't work. Though I don't personally know if that's the case, it is very likely. So, that is just... So, gameplay. We got quite a few interesting things to talk about here when it comes to gameplay. So, first thing, the interface for this game basically has 3 places you really go through. Your cell, which is pretty limited. It's a small little dome with bones making up your cell, and you're just trapped there with Limbrum. You can crush some cockroaches, and there's an interactable object later in the game, but it's really just a little hub for you. Limbrum, within its pages, are all the chapters, story, lore, customizing your character, going to the bazaar for more missions and other online activity goodies. Pretty much a huge chunk of the game is within Limbrum himself. And then, of course, selecting an actual mission chapter will begin the actual gameplay, which will throw you into an arena where you usually have to either kill a bunch of monsters and or a boss monster. Now, this is a very monster hunting type game, but not so much as like Monster Hunter itself. I like to say it's a very different. Well, games that try to either be the Monster Hunter like Monster Hunter, or intimidate. That's what I'm thinking of. To intimidate, to be like Monster Hunter, or try, you know. But a lot of those games, they don't have a leveling system or anything. They really just rely on deal, and that's possibly one of the things that I just don't like about Monster Hunter in general myself. It just feels very lacking in the progression in that sense, and lacking in customization. But that's just my subjective opinions on that. Interestingly, there was no deal, but instead there is your loadout of magic. Everyone is sorcerers in this world, and you get to load out 6 spells, a black whites, and you even have leveling. Though very simple and not as basic or classical as many JRPGs, there is a leveling system. So let's go into the different elements of how your character is created. So your character is a blank slate, so you get to customize the look, the faction, the name. You can pick different titles and that, and I'll go into factions here in a bit. But you get to pick 6 spells you can go into a mission with. It's important to probably keep a good balance, or the kind of spells you prefer at least. Because, well, these are the spells you got, and the only other thing you can use are the freebies and stages, and those are usually pretty basic. And really, this is your main cup of tea in your character's progression, getting more and more powerful spells, as different spells have multiple qualities, and some spells outright just replace one version of the spell. Now, a lot of spells do repeat. There's a lot of different throwable bomb, range, melee weapons. Some of them just change the types of elements and that. There's quite a bit of recycled stuff, but a lot of times there's also a few unique touches to some of them. Now, there are new things in Delta, new spells, monsters, and things that weren't in the original version. On top of that, they apparently added in a system where you can mix some of the spells into a combo. An interesting idea. But you have offensive, defensive, buffing. I personally liked having a melee, a range, a mortal type. Then I had the quickening, and I would usually have a heal, and then my last one, it would just be kind of whatever I felt was more appropriate, is kind of how I kept my kill. Now, black whites are very strange super moves. When you're in dire need of near death, you can activate your black whites. Now, these are a sacrifice that have a price. If you use it and you don't finish the mission, you will suffer the price. So, for example, the Gorgon is priced for your eye. You gain immense magical missiles, but after it's done, you gain impale vision, half health, speed downs. There's multiple different effects from these different ones: your heart, your legs, your white arm, your brain, your skin. The price is reduced defense by half. Each one has their different price, and you get to own them throughout the game and select them. I merely have only used them about like 3 times, really. They're really a last resort because they really leave you handicapped pretty bad. Now, your white arm, in the universe of this game, your white arm consumes life. You keep your energy and magic within your white arm, and it's what you use to level up. The game, as its title suggests, sacrifice things, but you also can save things. And this is where the game splits how your character develops. Max level is 100, and split between salvation and sacrifice, you can affect how your character's growth is depending on what you level up. By sparing things, you build up your defenses in life. By sacrificing, you build up magical and power. On top of that, you get carved sigils that you can put into your white arm that you can enhance your arm, and you can also affect whether your arm is divine or basically, you can have it neutral or be divine or chaotic, and that can affect additional stats. On top of that, later on, you'll get the right to transmute. You require to be max level to get this. Basically, you'll be near the end of the game unless you do a lot of grinding side mission type stuff. But the right to transmute gives you access to adding a special sigil to your character. This is basically required if you do the super boss content after the story, because some of that shit is bonkers hard, especially if you're doing it offline by yourself with AI. You're gonna really need special sigils, a lot of them. Now, factions. Now, again, I point out, I'm not familiar with the original version of Soul Sacrifice. To my understanding, the Grim faction didn't exist in the original version. It's new to Delta, and Avalon and Sanctum did exist in the original. So the faction system is three things. So, Avalon represents a group of sorcerers that swear to kill all monsters in the world. Sanctum is a group that wants the salvation for the world. And Grim is a neutral group that just lets fate decide. Picking your faction causes save, sacrifice, and a new option that didn't exist in the original Fate to affect you differently. Depending on your faction, what action you do may restore your health, enhance your magic, renew offerings. It just depends on which faction. Like, for example, with Grim, using Fate renews offerings. However, under Avalon, using Fate energizes the body. But using Fate as Sanction energizes the body as well, actually. But saving renews offerings under Sanctum, while in Avalon, Sacrifice renews offerings. Saving in Avalon restores health. Sacrifice enhances magic in Sanctum. And sacrificing in Grim enhances magic. Saving in Grim restores health. Personally, I ran with Grim, save for health, fate for renewed, and sacrifice for enhanced magic. That's kind of what I went with myself, but those are your choices on that. Further, once you unlock the bazaar, you can rank up with your faction. Good lord, you're gonna spend fucking forever to ever get max with any of these factions. It's fucking way too long. I'm not even remotely close to even like the midpoint of a full faction, and I beat the Italian game. So yeah. You also get access to an ally tab. Now, story missions, you don't get to pick your allies, but there's a lot of side content stuff where you can choose 2 allies, and you can save a lot of fucking people outside of just the main story cast. Now, basically, whenever you save a human person, about 99% of them join you as an ally, and there's just a lot of them. Honestly, I kind of feel like the game would have been better off cutting about half of them and make the ones they kept more interesting, but you get a lot of variety though. But you can't customize those spells. All you can do is rank them up, which will improve their current spell setup. So, but there's lots of magic to be gathered. The bazaar, I really didn't get to do a lot with the bazaar because half of it's locked behind online functionality, which this game suffered a horrible, horrible fate of being caught in the whole online pass shit that EA started during the PS3 and 360 era. Sadly, this game has a pass, and if you have a Vita, you should really understand why that's a problem, especially if you have a Vita TV. You can only have one account on a Vita TV, and I have the English Asian version, and my account is an American PSN account. So, there's no way for me to claim it on my PSN without just clearing my PlayStation TV, so I can't really comment on the online functionality of the game. Considering Freedom Wars, which is another game I really enjoyed on the Vita that Pad also recommended. This was a Pad recommendation, by the way. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this game. You can't even begin to understand, but considering people still were playing Freedom Wars when I was playing that, I would imagine there's probably still an online community for this game, but sadly, I don't really know. I do know there's a lot of love for this game. But for the things you can function, you can access, you can basically buy more clothing to customize the look. You can get additional missions, and you can also collect rewards based on just about everything you do in the game. But the other functionalities require online, and I mean, they're not even inviting a player. They're just, connect to online, does something and that. You can't even do that. It's kind of BS. Now, one of the impressive things, I'm going to slap Destiny so hard with this. So, if you've never played Destiny by Activision, it had the same problem that Final Fantasy XIII had, where it put all of its fucking story practically in text. Giant walls of text. But unlike Final Fantasy XIII, you had to go to a website and earn the right to be able to read them, which was just utter bullshit. This is a Vita game, remember, and this game puts Destiny to fucking shame. Now, is it all in the game? It tells you backstory, current events, how many of the monsters came to exist, what created them. Because the thing you gotta understand with monsters in this world is, monsters are people, animals, and even in some cases, plants. They are corrupted by greed and they turn into monsters. So all the different monsters have stories that explain how they came to be. On top of that, there's even explanations and stories about the different areas you go to, about the countries, about the organizations, all kinds of fucking stories, and they're so interesting. Many of them are just creepy, twisted, and shitloads of what the fuck. Now, the game takes a very strong inspiration from fairy tales. There's a lot of fairy tale related symbolism in the game. Like, Brothers Grimm would be very proud of this game, honestly, because it just fucking twisted as fuck. There were so many red herring twists in this game. It was just glorious. But that's getting more into the story, though. But you'll go through Librem and unlock different chapters. You'll have the beginning, several years later, distant paths, and you just go through different chapters. On top of that, you have the Sorcerer Deeds, which are the Avalon Sanctum and Grimm encounters. On top of that, you also get access to Alice's Eternal Maze, which is, as far as I understand, also something new to Delta, which is basically an endless dungeon mode, which I would imagine what most people who do online play likely play in. On top of that, though, you got packs, which is just more fucking missions you can do. There's also a blank page thing you can make that makes like custom random worlds and shit. There's just almost like endless content. You can practically keep playing this game forever almost. But the music and presentation of the game, obviously being a Vita game, you're not going to get eye-melting looking visuals, but for a Vita game, I'd say it looks really good, in my opinion. Now, music, oh, good lord. It's like a violin just waping your ears in a good way. Like, the music is so good in this game. Like, I still think of several tracks in this game, still even to now, and probably for a very, very long time, along with its twisted story. I will probably hold this game in high regards for the Vita library for a very long time, if not for the rest of my life, honestly. It is just a really amazing game, honestly, considering that the presentation, a lot of it has to do with just being in limbo. Now, admittedly, you know, it is a lot of story being told from a narrative, narrator's perspective. You don't have a lot of, like, running around towns, traveling the world kind of thing. It's a very hub-worldy type situation where Liberum acts as a hub to arenas for you to access. And in that sense, that I think would be one of the biggest things that would turn someone off to the game if you like a lot exploring and interactivity in the world. And I usually am in that camp. I usually don't like a lot of hub world games. I've noted that before, like when I criticized the Kingdom Hearts game on the original DS, the first one, the what was it, 300 whatever fucking days times whatever over whatever. Like, I a lot of times hate games like that, but this one magnifico. By the way, did I mention this was made by Keiji Inafune at Concept? Yes, yeah, that guy, Mega Man dude, Mighty Number 9. Holy crap! Honestly, should have just fucking went with this game, man. Should have made this a series. It could have been like fucking some crazy blood, Dark Souls kind of fucking crazed thing. But I don't even know what Keiji Inafune is even doing right now anymore. But what would I give full value with this game, though? You know, because it's, in my opinion, it's a really good game. You really should check it out if you have a Vita. Even if you can't get the physical version, I would still get at least the digital version, and we'll get into why you might want to consider the digital version. I would give Soul Sacrifice Delta an astounding $49.99 value. I think it is really good and a very standout title for its deep lore, amazing music, and its twisted tale that left me on the edge of my seat once it started getting its hooks in me. I love many of the tales of the random characters from the three different factions. It's just awesome. Is all I can just really say. Just flabbergasted. Now, if you're going to look into this game, if you want Delta physically, it only had an English Asian version, which is very expensive now. It's about $90 to $120 on eBay. It's not easy to get. Like, the cheapest one is $79 because it has a damaged case with it. It's like people really hoarding it for high prices, though. However, you can get this digitally for $17.99 at a permanently reduced price, as it was originally $39.99, which means the value, it's worth more than what it was being sold for. A very well value score indeed. But yes, if you want physically the Delta version, you're going to sadly have to pay some for the English version. Now, the Japanese version for Delta sells a lot cheaper, around $20 to $30 from what I can tell. And if you don't mind basically not being able to understand any of the story because of Japanese, the game is perfectly playable, as your choices only matter in the final fights of the original game and the final fight of Delta. So you don't really have to worry about what you sacrifice or save, honestly, other than that. But unless you know Japanese, you're not going to understand story. You just got to figure out what magic does what, and boom, you're good. So that's about the only advantage of getting the Japanese version. So that's a your call situation. But being $17.99, that's a really cheap price, honestly, for the Delta version. Now, if you want the English original Soul Sacrifice version, which is important to note, Soul Sacrifice is not compatible on the Vita TV Delta is, Soul Sacrifice isn't. So if you do go up that route, be aware that you better be playing on the handheld unit. But the original version is not too expensive, between $20 and $40 for a physical copy. Much more cheaper, but you don't get a lot of the new content, 2 additional endings and that, so personally I really strongly recommend getting Delta, honestly, because I really feel like it adds a lot more to the game, honestly. But that's going to be your call. So, with that said, let's get into spoilers. Spoilers! Because after all, this is where your story began. It's time to say what I thought about it. And boy fucking hell is it twisted. Not to get into all the nitty gritty and just make it a little short and sweet. Your character is basically related to the leader of Sanctuary, and they got captured after the world ended. And Limblom is the author of the book. I guess that shouldn't really be that shocking after all. That would explain why the book's alive, right? But the thing is, you find out the story is in a continuous cycle of repeating. Basically, there's a sacred chalice that comes up in different people's stories, including the author's main story. And it grants wishes. Now, you see upon interactions with it, that people who make wishes on it have to sacrifice something. It takes something away from you. And this is what keeps the world repeating over and over again. Because the world gets to the end, where it's just basically completely kaput, and someone wishes for the world to be saved, but monkey paw effect, it just reverts the world backwards for everything just repeat again. Apparently, though, this is where Delta changes things up. Apparently, it's happened so many times that it's been causing regression into repeating storylines to where things were actually starting to actually happen differently. And this is where Delta's story picks off from the original Soul Sacrifice, and why the Grimm faction is really important to it. The Grimm faction, you find out, exists because they believe in the sense that the world is repeating, and they're trying to fight that. And you end up getting mixed up in that. But ultimately, that path leads to you understanding the world and what's going on, and stop trying to permanently stop the world from regressing backwards, which involves fighting the gods of this world. Which leads to the realization that sorcerers aren't actually sorcerers. Everyone's druids. You're harnessing druid magic, which makes sense because when you think about it, you're getting a lot of the magic from the environment, from other creatures and that. It's very druid-y. And considering the god of greed in this world is a druid magic, it makes a lot of sense, and it's just very interesting. Like, honestly, read the pages about a lot of the fiends, especially the gods and the world and Avalon, and it's just a lot of interesting weeds. It is very interesting little tales, that. But I really enjoyed the story, and that's not even getting into the individual character arcs that are in the faction stories. Like the greedy fucking sorcerer from Avalon, probably still one of my favorite characters. Twists in his story's ending. Like, honestly, there's just a lot to like about most of these characters. There's probably like 2 of them I thought was just kind of but I liked almost all the fucking characters in this game. Everyone had interesting twists, red herrings. I just really liked it. I really recommend it. And I don't even know how to convince you to go to PSN, download this game, please. Please do it. It's a delightful game. It really is. I mean, I don't even really have that many complaints. Personally, while I would probably like more of an MP system versus a charge system with your magic, it's livable. I'd like a little bit of information on how many charges I have left, though, because how the game does it is it starts blinking more and more rapidly as you get less charges and it kind of becomes tricky for me to really know how many charges I have left when I'm like, you know, in the last maybe like 3 left or something. I would have liked maybe a more solid indication of when you're at 1, or maybe like a number showing this is the last 2 or last 3 charges you got or something. But again, just a minor gripe. Just a minor little gripe. That's all I really got for this game. It's just a few minor gripes. And I didn't really experience any bugs or crashes or anything with this. Besides Online Pass, this game is really good in my opinion. I don't know if the Online Pass thing is affected on the US version, by the way, considering we never got a physical version, so I would imagine you just buy the digital version and you automatically have it. Actually, you know, that's a good question. How did Online Passes work for digital versions of games that had them? I don't really know, to be honest. But you might have to look in that on your own accord. But seriously, go get this game. Maybe not necessarily the physical version of Delta, as I said, very expensive. Thank you, Pad, for fucking voting this game when it was actually in stock. I got one of the restocked ones that PlayAsia did. Man, this would have been on one of my regret lists if I hadn't gotten it. It's a beautiful game, honestly. Like, there were parts of it that honestly made me want to cry, honestly. Like, just, there's so many touching and interesting twists in this game, and I just can't want to spoil all of them. But do me a favor, get this game if you haven't beat it. I would love it. Anyway, thank you for listening to my ramblings of Soul Sacrifice. This is a game that I wanted to do better justice for. This is the 3rd recording I've done with this, so hopefully I done it some justice. But out there in the world, it's fresh and new, and the starting of the timeline is gone, so let us go out into the new world. After all, this is where your story begins. Until next time, here at the Proving Grounds, enjoy the fresh new world.